Bears at this point in time, assuming there's salmon around, are moving from location to location in some river systems, from early spawning streams to late spawning streams, following this sort of moving buffet of salmon that's available to them to maximize how many pounds they put on before winter. Incoming salmon are this tremendous vector of what we call marine-derived nutrients. So if you look at, you can look at particular isotopes and track the signature of marine-derived nutrients through the freshwater ecosystem. So these nutrients come in as salmon, they're consumed by bears, bears transport them across the landscape and excrete them. They then, that signature can be tracked through plants, trees, through flies. So many aspects of this ecosystem and many individual plants and animal communities are completely dependent on salmon for this annual influx of nutrients. In Bristol Bay in particular, we benefit from sort of three things. One, it's incredibly productive sockeye salmon habitat to begin with. A series of interconnected lakes and tributary streams that are just ideal from a salmon perspective. The second is that we have relatively intact habitats. We have no major development on most of these river systems. And the third piece is that we have a very well-managed fishery. Each of these individual fishing districts are managed under this fixed escapement policy to ensure that in the event the return of salmon is too low to support the needs of future generations of salmon, the fishery is then closed. So this has been very effective in ensuring that we have both a sustainable and high production fishery over time. One of the amazing things this year, this is probably is likely to be the largest return on record to the Naknek River system. So in terms of the escapement up the Naknek River, the number of fish that bypassed the fishery and made it up onto the spawning grounds, the average is about 1.4 to 1.5 million. This year we saw about 4 million escape. So a lot of fish up the Naknek River and on the spawning grounds, and from a bear's perspective, a lot to eat this year. To put things in context, the last highest escapement we saw up the Naknek River came in 1991, and that was about 3.5 to 3.6 million. So this is the largest escapement to the Naknek River we've seen since the 1960s, and is likely to be the largest return to the Naknek River in total in terms of catch plus escape. The fishing industry in Bristol Bay, both on the processing side and the harvesting side, as well as additional parts of the labor force that service the fishing fleet and the processing sector, it creates an incredible number of both seasonal and year-round jobs in these small communities in Alaska. Commercial fishery definitely dominates in terms of its harvest in Bristol Bay. So when we think about a large-scale open pit mine in this area, it's a fragile ecosystem. From an Alaska perspective, this is both a climatically and geologically unstable area. We have large freeze-thaw cycles. We also have periodic earthquakes, as we well know. So all of those make sort of persistent infrastructure to prevent a large-scale tailing dam failure, other aspects that might impact the ecosystem of greater risk. So any reduction in fish abundance over time is going to have an impact on both the number of jobs and the profitability of those businesses. It's hard to put an exact number on how much a reduction would impact those businesses, but certainly large-scale reductions in salmon production within Bristol Bay will have an impact. What we do know from other parts of the US and Canada is that trying to rebuild salmon habitat is somewhere between impossible and very costly. We can look at the Central Valley of California, for example. A tremendous amount of money, including taxpayer dollars, is being spent to try to foster production of king or Chinook salmon in those river systems. Part of what allows the salmon population to be productive over time and stable from a financial perspective is that you have this diversity of intact ecosystems. We know that once we start cutting out various parts of that sort of ecosystem portfolio, what we've seen elsewhere, particularly further south, is that you tend to see greater variability and population crashes over time. Once you start removing individual pieces of this intact network of habitats. Bristol Bay is an incredibly unique place. We have this amazing diversity of habitat that has led to high fishery production. And once we start removing different components of that habitat portfolio, we we often see in many other places more variability in salmon production over time and less sustainability. And it'd be a real shame to think about impacting salmon habitat when it's so productive. And it's one of the last places where we do have truly intact salmon habitat.